I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 podcast.
What's up, everyone? It is Richie here from the F1 Podcast, Season 5, Episode 14. We're recording this on Thursday, June 26th, 2025. Happy Baby Friday. I'm here with Andrew Cleary, my co-host, and we have a special guest today, Cayden Goodridge. Cayden, welcome to the pod. Cayden, for those that don't know, is racing in the 2025 Radical Cup Canada, and he'll be racing in Toronto later this month at the Honda Indy. Just a bit about him. Following a breakout 2024 season, he finished second in the GT4 Class of FEL Sports Car Championship and making his GT American debut at Indianapolis. Goodridge is now competing in the 2025 Emzone Radical Cup Canada Championship, the fastest competition class in the country. And I should also note that he holds second place in the championship standings, having secured pole position and two podium finishes in his first race weekend of the season. Cayden, it is good to have you on the F1 podcast.
It's good to be here, man. I'm super pumped for this. Yeah,
What's
yeah.
it feel like to have like, as many podium finishes as probably Ferrari does this season?
You lose.
To answer honestly, it feels good. It feels good. It's I yeah, no, it's been a really good start to the season for, kind of race weekend one. Um I don't know, there's not much to say. Like I kind of was coming in confident for the season, so it was good to capitalize on what I thought I was capable of, and then it's just looking forward to the rest of the season now and keeping that performance up.
And I think for a lot of teams that maybe don't compete in the top three, like how do you keep yourself disciplined when you're in that top three? Are you thinking about the car in front of you? Are you thinking about the cars behind you? Is it a mental game? Are you counting lap by lap? But I guess, and also just to be clear, Andrew's an Aston Martin fan, so it's like
We're
there's a little
supposed
bit
to be
of
bad. We're
yeah.
supposed to be bad though.
You
Yeah,
lose.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man. So it depends race by race. Sometimes you'll be like dead set focused on the car in front of you. I know for race one this year it was like that where I was, within a few seconds the entire race and kind of on his bumper for a good portion of it. Of the leader, that is. So sometimes you're like just in a dead set focus battle with the car in front of you. Sometimes it kind of starts to become more of a management game and you're just trying to minimize mistakes and minimize wear to your tires and just bang out consistent lap after consistent lap. I'll say I never really worry about cars behind me. My mentality for it is essentially if they catch up to me, then I can start worrying about them. But as long as they're behind me, right, anything could happen. I don't really care if they start catching for a few laps or maybe they were a tenth quicker or whatever. As long as kind of my race is going the way I've been planning it out, um, I kind of I don't bother myself worrying about things that the, kind of worst case scenario, what if the driver catches me? What if he makes a move? I wait till it happens, if it ever happens, and then I kind of handle it as it comes, pretty much.
I love that mentality. I think that's a great way to focus, because if you think about way too much in the back, how are
Mhm.
you going to be able to capture what's in front of you in the front
Yeah,
in that
exactly,
sense too, right?
exactly. You like it's really easy to get into a trap of like staring at your mirrors if there's a car behind you. Um, And all that does is really slow you down, right? You start taking attention off your own driving, you start taking attention off what you want to be trying to focus on, which is kind of making way to the cars in front. And then you start maybe finding yourself taking defensive lines when you really didn't need to, just because you see them in your mirror, you get freaked out, you get anxious about it. So I find it way easier to just ignore everything behind me, pretty
And
much.
has it, and I was gonna say, has racing always been something that you've grown up like it's inspiring to, or this has been like a recent phase? Like, I guess like kind of, I think that's the one thing, especially in Canada, motorsport racing, we don't really talk about it that much, but I guess until recently, it was when Jacques Villeneuve won in '97 for Formula One, that put us really
Mhm.
on the map. We're starting to see more traction with motorsport racing, but like tell me a bit about your journey, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I've been a lover of motorsports and of cars since like before I can remember. It started with my dad, really. So my dad was, like you said, he was a big fan of Jacques Villeneuve even before he went to F1. He was following him in IndyCar. So my dad's been super into racing, super into motorsports since before I was born. So then growing up for me, I was growing up in a house where kind of every weekend there was the sounds of F1 on the television. Um, I would always be hearing my dad sim racing in the other room way before it was really popular, like on GTR2 and the old classic games, right? So that kind of like my earliest memories were racing and F1 and Need for Speed because I was a kid. So it's kind of cars and racing has been with me my whole life, and then just getting able to actually get into it myself later on in my life when I was 16 was kind of a really, really dream come true moment, essentially.
Because you mentioned your dad and getting you into the sport, but how integral have your family and your friends have been in your racing career thus far? And what's it like to have them join your racing journey as you grow through the ranks?
It's completely integral. Like, this goes for me and it goes for pretty much everyone in racing. Like, when you're starting out in karting and even far into your career, because we start young, your parents are everything, right? Like none of this is possible without your parents, without your family supporting you. Everything from just the decision of them letting me start go-karting because it's an expensive sport to be into and to compete in. So having them support me with that and letting me go racing, and then also just literally physically supporting me at the track, because especially in like the lower levels of go-karting, it's a very um like it's a tough thing to do by yourself, especially. So pretty much everyone kind of starts out the same way with you driving, and then your parents are your mechanics, right? And it was the exact same for me. So I had either my dad or my mom at the track with me all the time for every race weekend. They always helped me with setting up the cart. They would give me, pointers as best they could for driving. So yeah, pretty much everything I have now with racing is completely, completely dependent on my parents and my family supporting me through it.
Did you find yourself that you were always racing in Ontario in the GTA, or were you kind of traveling throughout Canada when you kind of were starting up go-karting?
So it's interesting. So starting go-karting, I was only at Goodwood Kartways is one of the two kind of biggest karting tracks in kind of the GTA area. So I would be at Goodwood Kartways for their club racing, and then as I kind of made my way through the ranks of karting, I started branching out, doing regional championships in and around Ontario. So going, visiting tracks like Mosport or Point Pelee, which is by like Windsor area, or Sutton, which is a very beautiful, like classic kart track. And then eventually in the later years, I did start to travel more for races. So as you get more serious, you enter international competitions. Like I did the Florida Winter Tour a couple years, and that is, as the name implies, that's in Florida. I was at the Rock Cup Super Finals in Italy one year, which was an amazing experience. Um, so that was kind of the kind of last 2 years of my karting, and then it's an interesting feeling of going back, almost back down in a way, because when you get into kind of low level car racing, you're right back at local stuff, club level, sticking to Ontario. But yeah, I have traveled occasionally, mostly in karting.
What have those travel experiences been like? Because you see the glitz and the glamour of the F1. Max Verstappen has his own private jet and all that stuff. But in karting, it is bare bone. Like rubber on the road. What has the travel been like with family? And then what do you do to pass the time on that travel?
It's cheap motels, it's camping, it's basically as a as little as you can get away with for travel, because karting is so expensive, and even now in car racing, because car racing is so expensive, and because actually a big thing is tracks are in the middle of nowhere, most of them, right? So rather than have like a multi-hour commute in the morning to get to the track, it's usually really way more convenient for people to be, either camping at the track in an RV or in like a really close local like motel or something. It's really not fancy. Nothing like you see in F1. That's, those millionaires, they have fun, but for most of us, it's really, really kind of just whatever gets you to the track in the morning, whatever you can do to get there.
What is your mental state? Like, what is your rituals? Do you like listen to a certain podcast? Do you listen to, hopefully the F1 podcast, but do you listen to like music or I guess like for me, it would just be, I think I would just be listening to pump up tunes just to get me ready.
Mhm. It's honestly, I don't personally have kind of much in the way of rituals. I like to listen to music on the way to the track and in the morning, but I do that anyway. I'm a big fan of music. I'm a musician myself. So I don't find that as a special thing for racing. The closest thing I have to kind of rituals to get me in the zone beforehand is reading. So I've been a big reader my whole life. I love books. Um, and it started just as a way to pass time because sometimes at a racetrack you're incredibly busy, and then sometimes you have like 4 hours between sessions and nothing's really going on. So I started reading at the track, and I found that it is, for me, a really, really great way to kind of take a break from all the stress and the pressure of performing and get it completely out of my mind, have be, completely immersed in, a fictional story in a different world, whatever. And then when I put the book down, it's like I'm completely refreshed, ready to go. It's so that would be kind of my only real like ritual that I do consistently at races, and I find really kind of helps me get in the right headspace of just chilling out, not stressing about it until it's time to get going.
Well, speaking of, race day, I saw your story. We saw your story yesterday about your new livery for the season. It was freaking fire, man. I mean, it was so cool. Had like that Joker-esque look, but love the incorporation of the flag of Barbados and the Barbados trident in the rear wing. So give us, what was your thoughts behind the design and colors? And then, what does it mean to be, to you to represent Barbados at the track and be in the part of the conversation with like the exciting young Bajan drivers right now, such as Zane Maloney that we're seeing in the Formula Series?
So for the design of it, honestly, it's mainly just because purple's my favorite color. I love purple.
Awesome.
Green was just a really nice way to accent that, and it kind of came together in a really striking livery that I think looks amazing.
It's it's
Um,
it's fire, man. I mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I would
yeah.
wrap that on my
10 out of
car any
10.
day.
Yeah. It 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 definitely stands out. We get a lot of comments on it, so but that's good, right? That's what you want. But the purple was just it's my favorite color, man. That's what I like. Um, and the Bayesian flag, yeah, the Bayesian flag, and then also this one, it's a little less obvious, but across the back of the car, there's the kind of the famous Bayesian flower. Um, that I really wanted to have on the car, and I'm glad it's there because it does mean a lot to me to be kind of racing in the name of Barbados. I was born and raised in Canada, but my family has really strong ties to Barbados. So even like being raised here, there was always the kind of feeling in my house, and I always kind of knew in my head that Barbados was home, right? And I've
Yeah.
been there a number of times. My family's been there even more times before I was born. I love every time I get to go there. I wish I get got to go there more often. And it really means a lot to me to kind of be able to represent, our country and also as a way to represent my family, right? Because it's an important part of my family's heritage. So it's a symbol I've had kind of with me and around me my whole life. So it means a lot to have it on my car, yeah.
As you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you're racing at, in the Honda Indy this weekend, or, at the end of July, as part of the Radical Cup Series is going to be one of the junior series that lead into the event. But it's pretty much like a hometown for you, hailing from Brampton. It's going to be a hometown race. What's it like racing in your hometown race in that regards? And how was it exciting to have like all of your family and friends in attendance for that race?
Yeah. Yeah, it really is something else. It's a very unique experience. Um, it's interesting, right? Because it's racing in Canada, it's kind of all your home tracks, right? You know, nothing's that far away. I mean, some of them are, but like a track like Mosport is not too far away. But racing downtown Toronto, you know, being able to take the GO train into the track, something, you know, I've taken all the time to go on like a shopping trip down to the Eaton Center or whatever. It's a surreal experience, actually, honestly. And I think part of that is because it's a street circuit. It's like you see sites and places and landmarks that you're so used to as, you know, a completely different context from racing. And now I get to drive a car here, right? Now I get to race here. It's really, really fun. And it's yeah, having kind of family and friends there is also an incredible experience. It's I kind of touched on this earlier, but racing can be a really, really stressful thing. There's a lot of pressure, as there is with any kind of, you know, competition, any sort of sports where you're competing at a high level. There's the pressure to perform, there's the pressure to win, but I think uniquely in racing, there's also the stress of like you're going fast, and you're going fast close to other cars, close to walls, and, you know, the reality of what if I have a big accident is kind of always in the back of your head, even as much as you try not to think about it. So there's a lot of kind of emotional stress and pressure that comes with racing. So having friends and family there at the track is an incredible help with that. And you know, it makes it fun. It makes it fun, right? It's something I kind of lament as a driver, actually, how little fun you sometimes have at the track because, you know, other people get to party, stay up late, have a fun time, especially like people camping at the track and watching the fireworks and everything. And I kind of have to just ignore all that. I got to focus on my competition. I got to get my sleep. Having people there that I can hang out with and have a good time in the short breaks I get between sessions, it really, really kind of completes the experience to me.
And I think if I can build off Andrew's question there on a couple of things is when you talk about the importance of the Toronto track, it is a street circuit. It's pretty tight. There's only one real straightaway on the lake shore. So like your margin of error, and even if you remember last year, Andrew, the Indy car, there was a massive crashes within, I think it was turn two or turn three with Pato Award. I guess kind of like usually after a race, what is kind of your mindset? Is like, okay, am I watching film? Am I trying to figure out, like, talking to my pit crew, what can I do better? And you talk about how, you know, people do party around you, but and you just need to get into that mindset. Or I need to think of the next free practice. I need to think of the next qualification. Um, Kind of like you look at the track like Toronto. It's like, where do you think that you, if you're allowed to say, where do you think the strongest points are for you, ideally in that for that weekend coming up?
Um, yeah, so hold on, a couple parts for there. So for like kind of my process coming off the track and then getting to focusing on next sessions, yeah, it's a lot of review. We review video, you review telemetry data, and you kind of every little thing. Sometimes there's big steps to be made, sometimes it's just little nitpicks, right? But you have to be putting as much effort as you can, even if you think there's nothing really that you felt was like an obvious thing you could improve on. You have to look through it and kind of drill yourself on if there's even the smallest thing you can touch up. Um, and especially at a track like Toronto, actually, because it's the street circuit and schedules are limited, and also because it's such a big weekend with, you know, IndyCar coming, and some years we have NASCAR and there's IndyCar support series, and schedules get really tight. And because it's a street circuit, you don't have the opportunity to practice beforehand. So there's a lot of learning on the fly with Toronto. After every session, there's big, massive kind of takeaways from it in terms of driving and in terms of car setup. and all these things that for a track like Mosport, you would have the opportunity to have, one or two or three or however many you can afford, really, test days ahead of a race weekend. So you're kind of squishing all of your testing and all of your analyzing and all of your experiments with different driving styles and different setup directions. You're squeezing it into like a minuscule amount of time. So it gets really hectic, and yeah, there's a lot of self-review. There's a lot of review of video and data.
We're going to build off that question because we know you're studying software engineering program at Carleton right now, and coming off with regards to the data analytics, how have you been able to utilize like your degree in that sense in terms of data analysis, software systems knowledge, to really be able to gain a competitive edge on your competition during that week, during your race weekend?
Yeah, I think it's a bigger help than I even would have thought coming in. So, um, it's it's honestly it's more so about the kind of overall engineering background because for software engineering, right, you start, or at least how my university, Carleton University, does it, is every engineering program starts in kind of your general basic fundamental engineering courses before you sort of diversify out. And having that kind of, you know, basis understanding of engineering concepts and of physics, it helps a lot in understanding the mechanics of the car that you're driving, right? There's a lot that you can do in just having a better understanding of why things are the way they are in driving, right? Like I as a driver might know because I've been told and I've kind of learned through experience that if you stiffen, the rear springs, that can make a car kind of looser, it make a car oversteer more. Um, but as like thinking about it from a physics point of view, understanding like why stiffening the rear springs has that effect on the car, can help you understand in what situations you would want to do that as compared to any other number of changes you could make to make the car looser. Like the difference, say, if you stiffen the rear sway bar versus stiffening the rear springs, they both are generally making the car, looser in the rear, but they're subtly different, right? Because mechanically they're doing different things to the car. And so having that understanding of the mechanics of how a car works and how individual setup changes affect it is really, really helpful for dialing in a setup for a weekend. It's helpful for understanding your own driving in things like, so trail braking is a big one you'll hear, but generally, kind of every technique you do when you're driving is about controlling the transfer of weight across the car and across the springs. And that there's a lot of feel in it, but there's also a lot of physical understanding that you need to maximize that. And also it helps communicating with your race engineers, honestly. Setup wise, I know um, the guy I used to work with, Rasim. He's brilliant, brilliant engineer, setup guy. He kind of was the head of setup at the team I used to race for, VPX. He also had an engineering background. Um, and having that kind of shared understanding and shared vocabulary really, really kind of just fast tracked a lot of our communication. We were on the same page a lot more, and we could communicate ideas about setup way more effectively rather than just kind of vague words about, it feels like this or it feels like that. We could talk more specifics. So I think having a kind of more engineering background and having a better physical understanding of the platform of cars is incredibly useful. More useful than I think people give it credit for. And I think a lot of drivers could benefit by studying, honestly.
I think in the end of the day, it's just always just it's yes, education's important and just like understanding the car and like we've seen like greats. I think everyone keeps talking about Adrian Newey's book about how he built like a championship car, and it's interesting. You talk about that relationship with your engineer. If you can share, do you find yourself, do you talk a lot in a race, or are you pretty just tell me the lap times, tell me what's going on, or like if obviously weather comes up, just please let me know if it's going to rain. Like I don't know what could it, I could only imagine if I'm taking a sharp turn. I don't want anybody in my ear right at that second, which is hard
Yeah.
to try to do. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's that honestly is very driver preference. For me personally, I very much do not like radio chatter. I am terrible at being active on the radio. I'm terrible at giving my teams, sometimes the team is asking you to relay information to them, and I'm terrible at doing that. I am better at listening than I am at speaking. It's like having someone kind of talk in your ear it can be distracting, but it's generally okay. But having to mentally go, okay, I gotta like, reach for the radio button and I gotta like
Yeah.
word my thoughts properly. Yeah, I really not a fan of talking on the radio during a race. And for information that I like to hear, it's just lap times, honestly. It's lap times I find useful, really useful because they'll change so much throughout a race. So it's a really good gauge. Like it's less about, okay, I was a tenth quicker than the guy in front of me this lap, and it's more about, okay, as we're like 20 or 30 minutes into the race now, and my lap times have dropped off, but I'm being told that so have his, right? We're neck and neck. So I know that like his tires are kind of suffering the same amount as mine. I know that I'm not making any kind of major mistakes in terms of managing my tires. They're kind of right in the window they expect to be. And that just kind of helps me cool my head. And because it's when you don't get told those, it's easy to kind of get on yourself because like you can tell that you're driving slower, right? You can
Yeah.
tell that my lap times are not what they were at the start of the race, and part of that's tire wear, but I'm always questioning like is it like 80% tire wear and maybe 20% is just me driving worse, right? Or maybe it's all down to tire wear, but maybe I've done a terrible job with my tires and like other people are doing better. So that is the one kind of really important thing for me is kind of having that update of how other people's performance through the race compares to mine to just kind of give me the confidence that yes, I'm in the right window. I've done a good job with my tires. The track's greasy, but it's greasy for everyone. I don't need to start trying to push harder, trying to make up time that I think I'm losing, right?
Wow, that's like, yeah, that's I've never really thought of that, especially like you hear these conversations of the radios, like the disputes between drivers and their engineers, and obviously it's all dependent, but like obviously that relationship between you two is so important, and like understanding that balance is like obviously some of your competitors probably have different perspectives too. But I think that's really good for those that don't really know what is those conversations like between the driver and the engineer. And then it all comes down to preference. I wanted to segue into more around you, not so much you in the car, but like let's talk about the fans and the perspectives because I think it's no secret that the F1 cultural boom has really changed in the last 5 years. And because of Drive to Survive, we're now seeing that with like the F1 Academy. They have their own series. Drivers are having their own things. While this so much as the focus might be up here, and for a driver like yourself, are you starting to see that kind of segue down to you? Are you seeing that more people are like approaching you and saying like, "Hey, I've watched you race online, or I've seen your social media." Like we are obviously getting that as a podcast because we're in this space, but like we always want to
Mhm.
find to highlight lower, I don't want to say lower, but other divisions of racing because I think that's also very important because it's not just F1. It's you
Yeah.
talk about karting, it's talking about, the Radical Cup that you're participating in, but are you finding that yourself as a driver? And if not, like how can we promote you even more? And I think starting with these conversations is a great way.
Definitely, definitely. I am, yeah, actually. It's hard for me to really judge because I've only been getting into kind of car racing in the last 2.5 years, which essentially lines up to the F1 boom, right? So I don't
Yeah.
really have a good kind of frame of reference for what it was like before, but I can tell you what it is like right now is a lot of a lot of fans and also a lot of kind of friends and really anyone that's not in the motorsport space already as a driver or a team member, it is increasingly getting, really easy to get people into a conversation about racing or get people excited about racing by, making that comparison to F1 because so many people have heard about F1 nowadays, right? Like I'll get a lot of times if I'm, meeting someone new or explaining to someone what I do, right? I can say, I race cars and they're like, "Oh, like F1." And I'm like, "Yes, exactly like F1. Different cars, but right idea, right?" And you can see right away when they make that connection, people's like, their eyes light up because Drive to Survive has gotten so popular that it's kind of like pe obviously, everyone knew that car racing was a thing, but having that kind of more mainstream understanding of what it's actually like and kind of how exciting of a sport it is. I'm biased, but I think truly it's an amazing, amazing sport. Having that connection and that familiarity through F1 really, I'm finding, is a great way of getting people excited and interested about any other kind of motorsports.
I think if I can build on that, I think it's very important, especially for your, when we talk about your division that you're racing in, is the accessibility about it.
Hmm.
Even if when I was at the Honda Indy last year, just the ability that we can walk up for the most part, like obviously you can't go on pit lane as a GA person, but as someone has media credentials, being able to get up close with the cars and the teams and
Hmm.
even some of the other racing schedules, like being able to meet some of those drivers. And I think that's important, especially for your success, your team success. Like I think that's very important. Is just the ability to kind of approach you and be able to kind of like, ask these questions or like, people that are obviously passionate about Formula One. There's also other racing going on in Canada. And I think that's very important. Like, I know this might sound a silly question. Do you dream about driving an F1 at one point in your career, or is that the goal for you, or like is F2 like what is the next stepping stone for you?
F1 is kind of, I mean, it was a dream for me, and I think if I had the opportunity, if I ever get the opportunity, yeah, absolutely. I think you could ask that of pretty much every driver, and yeah, F1 would be the thing to get to. But um, for me, unfortunately, I started really late in my life comparatively, right? I only started karting at 16, whereas most of the people getting through like the formula ladder starting when they're like 6 or 7 years old, right? So I started really late, but um, there's a lot of motorsports outside of F1 that, are just as equally, in my eyes, um, kind of exciting competitions and tough competitions and stuff that I would absolutely love to drive in. So like F1 is kind of, it's the big glamorous one, but for me, I'm equally as excited about hopefully in my career, fingers crossed, making it to like endurance racing, right? Winning the 24 hours of Le Mans, that would be a big, big dream of mine, right? Winning kind of any of the endurance championships, IMSA or WEC. I'm not picky, honestly, as a driver. Um, yeah, yeah. So it's less about F1 for me. If I started younger, that would be the goal for sure. But where I am in my career and at my age, it's a lot of I mean, honestly, it's really F1's the main thing that's closed off. The rest of motorsports is pretty open. It's just F1's the, more elitist, a lot harder to get into.
Look, I heard Cadillac's looking for some drivers, so we might have to tag them in these Instagram posts. Cadillac F1, if you're listening, I know you got two seats. I know one might be Valtteri Bottas, but like we got Cayden over here. I'm just saying.
So I guess, Kaden, then, based on what you said, based on your own experience, like what advice would you give for younger kids who are looking to getting into karting or single seat racing in general,
Mhm.
especially, advice for their families as well as mentioning how integral it is?
Mhm. Um, it's tough, but it is definitely doable. You shouldn't go into it as a means to an end, right? I like I'm not going to say that it's not realistic to, kind of make it big in racing. I think it definitely is, right? Obviously, not everyone can do it, but I don't think that it's unrealistic to have that as a goal to work towards. I think it's definitely an open possibility for, a lot of people that want to get into racing. But I think it's important to enjoy the process. There's a lot of there's a lot of fun to be had. There's a lot of good people to meet. Um, so my biggest advice would be do it, love what you're doing. Don't just love like kind of what you want to end up as. Love what you're doing in the moment. Be interested in it. Be curious about it. Try to make the most of every kind of step of the way because there's a lot of racing, even outside of kind of top level stuff that you might, dream of, ending up at. There's a lot in racing and in motorsports at lower levels, and at every, kind of step in between, right? So love what you do. Do it for the passion of racing and of cars. But absolutely, if it's something you want to do, like go for it, right? It's a hard sport. It's an expensive sport, but I don't regret a second of it. Even if like I never made it to the point where I was able to make this a stable career, I would not regret a second of it.
This was very great, and we really appreciate you coming on the pod. But before you go, we got some quick fire questions that we love to fire out to some of our interviews. And
All right.
Andrew is the king of the quick fire questions.
Here we
So
go.
I'm going to turn it over to him. If you want to pass on any of them, good luck, but we need an answer.
All right, Cayden, first and foremost, what's your current
Let's
League
get
of
it.
Legends rank?
So I haven't played ranked right now in the current season, but just recently I was gold 3, I think. Not great. I
Love
think that's
it.
just about average, but I have fun. I have fun with it.
Awesome. All right, favorite track that you've raced at?
Toronto Indy, 100%. I've done a lot of sim racing, and even in sim racing, I love street circuits. Racing a street circuit in real life is just, oh man, it was everything I hoped it would be. I love that circuit. I love it.
Most memorable win of your career so far?
Um, that's a toughie. That's a toughie. Um, Funnily enough, I think in like kind of the professional car series that I've been in, I only have one win so far. But if we like look back at karting, I'd say my first major karting event win. It was the first Kart Stars event that I was competing at a high level in. I think I'd done one for fun in like my very, very rookie year, but it was whatever. But winning kind of my first Kart Stars being the kind of regional major championship out of Goodwood, winning that was it kind of it that was kind of the moment where I proved to myself that I was good and, could beat people and could win things. So that one still lives in my mind.
Awesome. All right, what's your go-to hangout spot in Brampton?
Um, Gage Park. Gage Park's a good one. I lived like very, very close to Gage Park and Four Corners, which is like the area around City Hall. But Gage Park was a beautiful spot. Yeah.
What about Ottawa when you're in school?
Ottawa. I lived on res, man. I stayed on the campus. I didn't go
We
exploring
love Res,
much.
don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Res life was the good
you don't
life.
like Elgin Street? You don't like Cartier? You don't like the Byward Market? None of those? Oh, you don't?
I've
Have you been to Elgin Diner, the 24/7 one?
the diner? No, no. I know Elgin Street. Like I've been around a bit, but no, no, no.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
All right, would you rather have a pole position or a podium finish?
I think pole position. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, you know, like first spot on the podium or like second and third, right? But I think pole is kind of special, It's obviously it's not the points paying finish, but there's something just really just clean about setting pole, right? Being the fastest person on the track. Yeah, pole's nice.
All right, but as kind of alluded to this earlier, but would you rather win 24 hours of Le Mans or 24 hours of Daytona?
I think Le Mans for me, although Daytona would also be really, really awesome. But Le Mans, it's just, it's so storied. It has such an amazing history and it's part of, the Triple Crown in motorsports. Yeah, I have to go with Le Mans.
What's your favorite instrument that you play or you're currently learning?
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. I love all my instruments. I love all my instruments. It's probably a toss-up between piano and singing, if you count that as an instrument.
Absolutely.
Yeah, toss-up between those two.
Your voice can be a pretty instrument at any time.
Do a barrel roll.
Yeah, man.
What's your go-to meal at the racetrack?
Anything I can get, gonna be honest. I honestly, actually, I don't like to eat a lot at the racetrack, especially like before I go on track. I really don't like having a full stomach or anything. I prefer, to keep it light. Um, Burgers are a classic, honestly, and it's less of because I like to go to it and more because they're simple, they're easy to get at a track. It's easy to bring like a barbecue or a grill or whatever. So burgers are probably the most common food I've had at a track. Yeah.
Awesome. I guess is it what's the dream track to race at?
Nürburgring, I think.
Nürburgring?
It's special. It's
Yeah.
special.
And then we're gonna go a little bit of fun side. So video game, Burnout 3 or Need for Speed?
Oh, Need for Speed, Need for Speed.
All right.
But the older ones.
Yeah.
There's why
What?
an emphasis I took Burnout 3. The older ones were the OG games.
Yeah.
Yep.
Warzone or Fortnite?
Warzone, not even being like these kids in their Fortnite. I'm never a big fan of the third person perspective, so Warzone.
What's your favorite arcade game of all time?
Favorite arcade game? Ooh, I haven't been to an arcade in a long time, man.
Not even Crazy Taxi?
Or go like, do you not have like a Palladium up in Mississauga there?
We did. I used to go to it as a
That place was
kid,
the
yeah, but I
shit,
haven't
man. That was
been in
the
years. Um, ooh, I think there was a Fast and Furious racing game as an arcade cabinet. I don't even remember if it was Fast and Furious branded or a different brand. Maybe it was Need for Speed. I don't know. I didn't look at the whatever was on the top, but I remember that specific. You could customize your car before you went into the race, whatever that one was.
Awesome. All right, then three more questions, all kind of F1 and Bish related. All right, Lewis or Max?
Lewis, easy.
Love it. Ferrari or McLaren?
I think I would have said McLaren before Lewis moved to Ferrari because I'm less of a fan of Ferrari, the team. Not that I have anything against them, but was never super passionate about them. But I'm a fan of Leclerc and Lewis as drivers. So now that they're together, yeah.
Yeah, depending on when day you ask, Ricci's a less of a fan of Ferrari, especially after races.
Yeah.
But the final question, Cayden, because you've been on the podium a bunch of times, what is your favorite way to pop the champagne bottle to celebrate the podium?
Good old fashioned one hard slam on the ground works every time, like a charm. And it's fun to do, like you're standing on your pedestal, you get a little hop, bang.
Have you
Good
broken
stuff.
any trophies doing
Yeah, I was
that?
gonna ask.
Not yet. Not yet. Fingers crossed.
Well, I guess we'll see in Toronto, and it will be only a couple more weeks, July 18th to July 20th. We're going to be seeing you race here in downtown Toronto. Cayden, thanks so much for coming on the F1 podcast. Always a pleasure, and we look forward to watching you live later next month. Make sure to tune in to all of our social media channels. Follow our link tree where you can find our Instagram. Cayden will put all your social media stuff in the comment section below. But thank you everyone for tuning in to this week's episode of the F1 podcast. And Cayden, thanks so much for coming on.